Hey guys, what's going on? Veil Decay here, bringing another video for you guys today. How you doing? How you been? Hopefully everything's going good for you. Today's video, we've got a 9.2 Fire Mage PVE guide, but before we jump into that, just wanted to say thank you real quick to everybody who stopped by the channel recently and shown some love. If you guys haven't checked out my last video, which is the Frost Mage PVE guide, I suggest you stop by the channel, give it a look. If you like what you see while you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you guys want to know what I'm up to, what I'm working on next, or just any kind of general WoW information, make sure to follow me on Twitter. And like I said, guys, I appreciate it a lot. It means a lot. Thank you so much. Let's start things off with what changed for Fire in 9.2, and while technically there were no changes to Fire in 9.2, there was some class tuning done about a week or so after 9.2, so we'll talk about that. The 2-set bonus for Fire, which increased the duration of combustion, was decreased from 4 seconds down to 2. Fireball's damage was increased by 20%, Fire Blast damage was increased by 10%, and Pyroblast damage was increased by 6%, giving Fire a full damage buff across the board, making it more competitive of a spec. Now let's talk about the stats you'll need as a Fire Mage. Starting off, you'll have Haste, followed by Versatility, then Mastery, and then Crit. The reason why Haste is at the top of this list is because the more haste you have, the more cast you can get off during your combustion windows, as well as your recharge rate of your Fire Blast being faster. Mastery is also a strong stat for Fire Mage and gets stronger the more targets involved in a fight. Alright guys, let's talk about what talents you'll be running as a Fire Mage. So for Fire, your talents are pretty much set in stone except for your last 2 rows, in which case you'll be running Conflagration in 1 to 3 target situations and Flame Patch in 4+ target situations. On your last row, you'll run either Kindling or Pyroclasm. Pyroclasm is a very strong single target ability that's really good in raids right now. It pairs very well with the Sun King's Blessing legendary and the Mirrors of Torment Covenant ability from the Venthyr. Kindling helps reduce the cooldown on your combustion, which pairs very well with Night Phase Covenant ability Shifting Power. Being able to have your combustion up quicker and more on demand makes it very strong for Mythic Plus and some raid situations. Now let's get into the good stuff. Let's talk about the rotation for a Fire Mage. So for Fire, you want to spam Fireball until you get a Heating Up proc, in which case you'll use a Fire Blast to turn that into a Hot Streak, which makes your Pyroblast instant cast. Fire Mages rely heavily on our combustion windows, and what combustion does for us is it gives us 100% crit strike chance and mastery equal to 50% of our crit strike stat for 10 seconds. It also activates our Infernal Cascade Conduit, which is why we stack haste to be able to cast as many Pyroblasts in that window as possible to maximize our damage. So real quick, I wanted to talk about Pyroclasm and what it does. Pyroclasm, when you consume a hot streak, has a 15% chance to make your next non-instant Pyroblast cast within 15 seconds deal 240% additional damage. Now, that kind of goes against the grain for a Fire Mage talent, considering that Fire Mages throw out a lot of instant cast abilities. But what this does is it makes the 3 to 4 second cast well worth it and makes it a very strong single target ability, especially when you pair it with the Sun King's Blessing legendary. Next, we'll be going over which covenants, soulbinds, and conduits are best for Fire Mages. The first covenant we'll talk about is Venthyr, and the reason why Venthyr is so strong for Fire Mages is due to Mirrors of Torment, which every time a stack is consumed, it gives us 6-second reduction on our Fire Blast. It's further amplified by our second legendary, which is Sinful Delight, which every time a Fire Blast charge is used, it reduces the Mirrors of Torment cooldown by 4 seconds, meaning that we'll have Fire Blast up more often to create more hot streak procs, making this a very strong single target build, especially if you can get power infusion every 2 minutes. The first soulbind we're going to talk about is Theotar the Mad Duke. And what makes Theotar so strong is a soulbind ability called Party Favors, which gives you access to the Mad Duke's Tea, which is a secondary stat buff that lasts for 4 hours. He also gives you a mastery buff that lasts for 12 seconds called Soothing Shade. The conduits that you want to run with Theotar are Infernal Cascade, Siphoned Malice, and in your third slot you want to run Controlled Destruction for single target and Master of Flame for AoE. The other soulbind I want to talk about is Nagia the Mistblade. She's a strong second choice for when Theotar's T is on cooldown. What makes her so strong is her Thrillseeker soulbind ability, which is a stacking buff that caps at 40 stacks, which then grants you 20% haste for 10 seconds. After those 10 seconds, her other soulbind ability, Fatal Flaw, kicks in, granting you 10 seconds of either crit or versatility, whichever stat you have more of. The conduits you want to run with Nagia are Infernal Cascade, Siphoned Malice, and for your third, for single target, Controlled Destruction, and for AoE, Master of Flame. The last covenant we're going to talk about is Night Fae, which has been the powerhouse covenant for Fire Mage since the beginning of Shadowlands. The reason for that is due to shifting power's cooldown reduction, and with fire having such short cooldowns such as Fire Blast, Phoenix Flames, Rune of Power, and Combustion, if you play Kindling along with Night Fae, you can have your combustions be just over a minute cooldown. Not to mention the fact that shifting power has AoE built into it, and fire being a strong AoE class to start with makes this extremely strong for Mythic Plus situations or multi-target boss fights in raids. So when you talk about soulbinds for Night Fae, there's really only one choice that stands out amongst the rest, and that's Dreamweaver. What makes Dreamweaver so strong is Pod Tender, which is a cheat death effect on a 10-minute cooldown. Next, you have Field of Blossoms, which is 12% haste for 15 seconds after using shifting power. The reason why this is so good for fire mages is because haste is our best secondary stat, especially for AoE situations. Lastly, we have Dream Delver, which is a flat 3% damage increase, so who could say no to that? The conduits you want to use with Dreamweaver is Infernal Cascade, Discipline of the Grove, and for your third one, for single target, Controlled Destruction, and for AoE, Master of Flame. Next, I'll be talking about legendaries, which ones are best, what slots to craft them in, and the best situational uses for them. The first legendary I want to talk about is Sun King's Blessing. What Sun King's Blessing does is after you consume 8 hot streaks, your next non-instant cast Pyroblast gives you combustion for 6 seconds. It can be crafted on the wrist or the hands. The best place to craft this would be on the hands due to the tier gloves being the weakest of the set. This legendary gives fire mages a very strong single target DPS due to its synergy with Pyroclasm and the Controlled Destruction Conduit. Most places that you'll use this legendary are in raids and your general daily WoW content, and it becomes very strong in Mythic Plus after you acquire your 4-piece tier set. So real quick before we move on to the next legendary, I just wanted to talk about how Sun Kings and Pyroclasm work together and kind of change the spec up a little bit. So what you want to do is you want to try to save your Pyroclasm procs for when you have your Sun King's Blessing and Combustion ready to roll. That way you get huge crits. You want to avoid wasting any procs you get waiting on your cooldowns because they're not always going to line up that way. It's better to use them than to lose them. You want to keep your Infernal Cascade rolling before or after combustion when you're rolling into your Sun King's Blessing window. That way that damage buff's already up and going. You don't want to use Pyroclasm during Sun King's Blessing unless you have Lust or Power Infusion, because that window's so small, you're better off just following your normal rotation to get that damage out. The next legendary I want to talk about is Disciplinary Command. What Disciplinary Command does is when you cast a Frost, Fire, and Arcane spell within 10 seconds of each other, it increases your critical strike damage of all your spells by 20%, but can only occur once every 30 seconds. This legendary can be crafted on the wrist and the finger. Of those two options, the finger is the better option due to better stat weights. Disciplinary Command has the ability to produce very strong AoE. Being able to roll this into a combustion and spamming Flame Strike can produce some crazy numbers. That's why you'll mostly be using this for Mythic Plus, at least until you get your 4-piece tier set, in which case Sun King's Blessing will take over from there. The last legendary I'm going to talk about is Unity. Unity is our second legendary slot, which gives us one of the 4 covenant abilities. For fire mages, the best place to craft this would be on your waist, followed by a flex spot on your boots. You're more than welcome to play whatever covenant you want, but if you're looking to min max, Venthyr is probably best at raiding right now. But if you do more than just raiding, like PvP and Mythic Plus, Night Fae would probably be a better option for you. Let's talk about the tier set for fire mages real quick and see how good it is for us. So the name of it is called Fiery Rush, and the 2 set gives us a 2-second increase on our combustion, which at the end of the day isn't that big of a deal. We're not going to feel that too much. The 4 set, however, every time we activate combustion, gives our Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames a 50% faster recharge rate. Kind of works the same same way the old Azurite Essence did back in BFA. Now what that means for us is that we can use Phoenix Flames outside of our combustion windows, which is why we get such a spike in our DPS from this 4 set. The last thing we're going to touch on is enchants, gems, and consumables. That way you're raid and mythic plus ready. Alright, so let's start things off with enchants. On your cloak you want fortified avoidance or speed. Bracers you want eternal intellect. Chest you want eternal insight or sacred stats. Weapon you want sinful revelation or celestial guidance. And on your rings you want to have haste. So next up we'll talk about gems. And for the most part, the rule of thumb is just throw a haste gem in there, but ultimately it comes down to what stats you need the most. So if you need another type of gem, throw that in there. Alright, so the last thing we're going to talk about is consumables. For your consumables, you want to have a spectral flask of power. You want to have your potions of spectral intellect. You want to have shadow core oil for your weapon. And you want to have your feast food buff or haste food buff. Alright guys, so in conclusion, fire mages are still very strong in 9.2. Venthyr has become the new top dog covenant pick. Fire will perform both strongly in raids and mythic plus. So if you're looking to play a fire mage, now's the time to get into it. And that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Much love. Peace.